Hey everyone, my name is DJ. You're watching the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and March of the Machines is super exciting. So many cool cards to get hyped about. The problem is that they're so expensive. These pre-sale prices are out of control, but I'm so hyped about the new set, man. If we look at these cards, like the most popular card right now, Fairy Mastermind, going in a ton of different decks, is over $8. You talk about the most popular Praetor, Jingataxis, about $17. The most built Commander, Thalion the Gitrog Monster, $14. Ren and Realmbreaker, the Planeswalker that everyone's excited about in the set, $21. Battles, a new card type, everyone's excited about it. You know, we're talking about the Invasion of Ikoria, great card, above $7. So with all of these super expensive cards, we just have to wait. But in the meantime, I have 8 sleeper cards. These are not expensive, but they're going to go in tons of Commander decks, and you could get all 8 of them for under $5. These are the budget pre-sale cards that you need to get for your Commander decks right now. At number 8, I want to talk about some functional reprints that are amazing in Commander decks. First up, we have Ren's Resolve. 1 in a red for sorcery, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. Coming in at 25 cents, this is gonna be great. And it compares really nicely to Reckless Impulse. Reckless Impulse is in a ton of decks, including a lot of those play from exile decks. And so we're gonna find a natural home for Ren's Resolve in a ton of different places. Also, Reckless Impulse is a common that is above $1. That's how much play it is seen. And so now having a functional reprint means that it's a perfect pickup for a quarter. Next, we have another functional reprint, Corrupted Conviction. A single black mana for an instant as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. This is a functional reprint of Village Rites, and Village Rites is played in a huge number of Commander decks. We're talking about 129,000 black decks. That's over 10% of black decks are playing Village Rites, which means that Corrupted Conviction is going to slot into so many different decks. Coming in at 35 cents in pre-sale, this is going to be an amazing inclusion and belong in a ton of different decks. All right, those are the functional reprints, great value, and you're going to naturally pick them up and slot them into your decks. At number 7, we have quite possibly the most CEDH playable card on this list. I want to talk about Phyrexian Censor. Phyrexian Censor is 2 and a white for a 3/3 Phyrexian Wizard. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-Phyrexian spell each turn. Non-Phyrexian creatures enter the battlefield tapped. So this is a rule of law version, and there are so many decks out there that need to cast multiple spells a turn to function. And if you've built your deck around taxing and constraining your opponents, Phyrexian Censor is going to be fantastic. Coming in at $1, it's most comparable to Archon of Emeria. This is 3 mana for a 2/3 flyer, same, can't cast more than 1 spell each turn, and this says non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. I do like Archon of Emeria a little bit better. Flying pressures those planeswalkers, gets damage in, and I also like taxing my opponent's mana even more. The problem is that you don't need to tax mana as much because you can't cast multiple spells, you know? So both of these together are going to be solid. And Archon of Emeria coming in at around $3 means that Phyrexian Censor is just going to be a great deal. At number 6, we have Halo Forager. 1 blue-black for a 3/1 flying fairy rogue. When Halo Forager enters the battlefield, you may pay X. When you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value X from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. Now, everyone jumps to another card that lets you cast things from your graveyard, Snapcaster Mage. It's important to put this to rest, that Halo Forager is not Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage is $17. Halo Forager is under a quarter, so big difference in price. So there's going to be a big difference in power level. Snapcaster Mage is way more flexible because it has Flash. Flash means that you can use it for so many different things like counter spells. That's pretty critical. It also costs 1 less mana, and I cannot stress enough how it's important for these cards that have an additional cost associated with it, whether it's a flashback cost or a paying X to be able to cast that spell. Your mana matters. Halo Forager is going to be a turn behind those other people casting Snapcaster Mage. Now, there are a few key differences that make Halo Forager a little bit better. That flying and that extra power is really good, especially if you want to pressure your opponents in some way. But let's talk about that extra casting costs. One thing that's interesting is that Halo Forager can hit things like Ancestral Vision that Snapcaster Mage cannot. See, Snapcaster Mage gives an Ancestral Vision a flashback cost, but you can't pay the flashback cost because it doesn't have a cost. Halo Forager instead, hey, it just like targets a card with mana value X, and the mana value is 0. So you can cast an Ancestral Vision with Halo Forager while you cannot with Snapcaster Mage. Now that's a very corner case scenario, but it is interesting. Now, I think the way that Halo Forager becomes amazing and exciting in Commander is that it hits your opponent's graveyards. That means you can nab a ramp spell or a board wipe or something powerful, something fun out of your opponent's graveyard. I love that. I think that that is the fun political way to play a card. Not to mention, we're comparing a $17 card to a card that's under a quarter, which is a huge gap in power level. And in terms of the card quality, Halo Forager kind of hangs. I think it's going to be super great in Commander decks. Next up, we have Into the Fire. 2 and a red for a sorcery. You choose 1. Into the Fire deals 2 damage to each creature, planeswalker in battle. Put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards plus 1. This is coming in at just under $1, and I really like the flexibility here. I talked about this before, how much I've really liked having like a delayed blast fireball. I've included in a ton of decks, and it's really performed well for me. And then also similarly, I've included a bunch of cards like Valakut Awakening. It's that land drop I need, or the, hey, I just need to get to an answer. I need to get to something else. Not to mention there are decks that will go heavy on the wheel effects. You know, they'll play cards like Karvath's Fury or even like Change of Fortune that are not as mana efficient. They just need to draw those extra cards to trigger things, just like things like a Locust God or a Nekusar or something like that. And so I like Into the Fire, and I think it's going to play really well with like a controlling red deck shell. Next up, we have Sea Double. 2 blue for an instant. This spell can't be copied. That prevents shenanigans. Choose 1. If an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, you may choose both. 8, it's Commander. Like, yeah, someone's probably going to have 8 or more cards, so we might be able to reliably choose both. Okay, copy target spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Copy a permanent spell becomes a token. Pretty good, okay? Create a token that's a copy of target creature. Wow, so just an instant speed token is pretty solid of any creature on the battlefield. Getting a token is sometimes better than just copying a creature, because having a token means that you can make other copies of it. It doubles up. Like, there's special things you can do with a token. Like, I'm talking about Brutaclad decks and other things like that. But having both of these modes is really solid, because it could be like, okay, I'm going to, take that spell, copy it for myself, and have board presence. Like, that's a lot of value. Look, if you're getting both modes on this, I can't imagine you not getting way more than 4 mana worth of value. Not to mention the potential for blowing people out by creating tokens in the middle of combat, or making sure that spells go a little bit wonky by having your own copy of it. It's pretty good. Coming in at 75 cents, I'm going to put this in a bunch of different tricky decks to be able to have fun interactions on the battlefield. All right, next we have Kami of Whispered Hopes. 2 and a green for a 1/1 spirit. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a permanent you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on that permanent instead. Tap to add X mana of any one color, where X is Kami of Whispered Hopes power. Oh my gosh, this does 2 of the best things. So it's a hardened scales on a creature. We've seen that before. It's very playable. +1/+1 counter decks want that effect a lot. We've also seen this like tap to add mana equal to its power. We've seen similar mana dorks be really successful. Cards like Gyre Sage, which can tap for a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it is in like 37,000 decks. Marwyn the Nurturer, definitely a little bit more elf focused, but taps for green equal to its power. Again, 37,000 decks. So it just lets you know that Kami of Whispered Hopes is just going to slam in to all of those +1/+1 counter decks. Anywhere you'd put a Hardened Scales and anywhere where you want big mana, like that's Commander. So great inclusion for so many different decks. All right, next we have our budget battle. We have Invasion of Zendikar, 3 and a green for a battle siege with defense 3. When Invasion of Zendikar enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. We normally play this effect. Just 2 lands on the battlefield for 4 mana is great. It's perfect. We play that. And coming in at 25 cents, then Battle of Invasion of Zendikar is fantastic. So just front side, great. And that's what we need to do. Evaluate it just on its front side. So solid. Invasion of Zendikar might beat out other spells because it has the potential as a permanent to do things like trigger twice or come back from the graveyard or get flickered in and out. So there are corner cases where this can just be way better. And then of course it can always transform, you know? So great on the front side. On the back side, it's just extra. If you do happen to flip it, easy to do because there's only 3 defense counters on it. It becomes Awakened Skyclave, a 4/4 vigilant hasty elemental. As long as Awakened Skyclave is on the battlefield, it's a land in addition to its other types. That's interesting text and actually really cool because it can play really well and dodge certain types of removal. It also has tap to add 1 mana of any color. Yeah. So it's a little bit of an extra ramp spell too. I wouldn't be surprised if I just like attacked this just to transform it and get another mana because that's what green decks want to do is ramp. And then finally, this is not the best card, but it is so much fun and so splashy and so Commander. I put it as the last of this list. It's Breach the Multiverse. 5 black for a sorcery. Each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature, planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards on the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. So mill 10. Like you're going to get some good stuff in a graveyard after you mill 10. And then you get in a 4-player pod, 4 creatures. That's gotta be worth 7 mana. It's a cool, big reanimation effect that builds your board from nothing. It's fantastic. Now, this is not Rise of the Dark Realms, you know. That is 9 mana though. It does get everything back from the graveyard. That's a big, splashy game-winning card, but 9 mana is actually way harder to get to than 7. It's not just like 2 turns later. Sometimes it's really hard to get up to those big mana costs. I also really like that this is 50 cents. Rise of the Dark Realms is around $15. So the comparison is just fantastic. So I think that this can be a big splashy reanimator card that is fun in Commander and super budget. So you can buy all 9 of these cards right now for under $5. That's great. You know, that's averaging out to about 50 cents a card. And when you're talking about these pre-sale prices and all this other stuff, you know what? Maybe you just treat yourself to some cards that, yes, might drop down to under a quarter, but in most situations, you can find one of these cards that's going to go into one of your existing Commander decks. So you can scratch that March of the Machines itch, get a cool card for your deck, and then wait for all those inflated pre-sale prices to drop down, and then you can get even more of these cards. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed a little bit of an off the beaten path look at these Commander cards from March of the Machines. Make sure to check out these and plenty of other pre-sale cards at Cool Stuff Inc. They're the sponsor of the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and when you do, use the coupon code JUMBO5. That's going to save you 5% off your order. I want to thank my patrons. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I hope you guys have an amazing day. I'll talk to y'all really soon. Bye-bye.